Man, it feels so incredible to be back for Victims and Villains. My name is Josh. Let's start monkeying around as we talk about Osgood Perkins' film, The Monkey. Now, before we start talking about The Monkey, I will say we will be doing channel updates. As to our last update, we will update them as well as updates on podcasts, future events, and everything that we had scheduled for the February through April kind of span of time. But first, let's jump in and talk about The Monkey. This Stephen King adaptation translated through the insanity that is the Perkins vantage point tells the story of twin brothers that embark on a deadly secret and inheritance from their father that gives them a little bit more than they bargained for in the channel of a toy monkey. Now, if that premise sounds a little bit batshit crazy, then hold on to your hats, because this movie is literally as crazy as the plot sounds, and I am here for every freaking second of it. Now, Perkins' last film, Longlegs, was one of my favorite films of last year, and The Monkey, as a result, became one of my most anticipated films of this year. And boy howdy, does this film not disappoint in the slightest. First off, Theo James absolutely crushing it in this role. This is probably, from what I've seen from him as an actor, this I would say is a career best performance. And going back to Longlegs, Perkins just has a way of really getting the best performances possible out of his actors. And here with The Monkey and with James playing not one but two roles, vastly different from one another, it just keeps kind of proving that track record positive. I love the direction this film takes, because this film has an element of seriousness to it, but also at the same time it has this very dark sense of humor that is present throughout the course of this, and it honestly feels a little bit like horror royalty behind this one. Not only the fact of having Perkins behind the camera and serving as a writer for this film, James Wan's also producing, and this is based on a film short story by Stephen King, one of the greatest voices in the genre. But this film also operates and feels like this generation's Final Destination, and the last act throws a little bit of Hellraiser in here for good measure, and as you can see, I'm clearly here for both of the latter two. With this film having such a dark sense of humor, this film is honestly really funny. This film is way more funnier than I was expecting it to be. And in equal parts, this film also has an insane amount of gags in it that are honestly some of the best gags that I've encountered. Now, I feel like I should preface that statement by saying that that's not to say that there haven't been good gags or even exceptional gags in the horror genre in the last few years, but typically a movie has a singular gag that they will talk about in the fashion of the Terrifier films or in A Violent Nature, where that is the scene that everyone kind of buzzes about. And here, The Monkey, it's really hard to kind of pin down that one iconic moment. I think there is a lot to dissect in terms of the gags here, because honestly, these are some really creative death sequences that they have. With that said, I will also bring back up the Final Destination of feeling that this film has, because these are honestly some of the craziest, wackiest deaths that I've ever seen put on here onto film in any medium, and I haven't really had a feeling like that since the very first Final Destination or even Final Destination 3, and this film just kind of feels like it sits right at home with those movies. There is an insane amount of fun to be had here, and this is probably one of my favorite things about this movie, is just how fun and crazy it is, because it walks this level of dark comedy, but these like almost throwback to 80s camp. And on top of that, there is these really strong emotional beats that when they hit, they really hit. But then there are these little bits of comedy to kind of break them up, so this film doesn't feel as thematically heavy as Perkins' last film, Longlegs. which in turn I also think kind of demonstrates his range as a storyteller and as a director to really tell this really funny, really smart, and also oddly creative, but also surprisingly emotional story like The Monkey. This film has impeccable pacing. I was really impressed with the pacing of this movie. I was honestly surprised by how long we spent in Hal and Bill's childhood, kind of building up the lore of the monkey before kind of getting to adulthood. But honestly, it works really well for the story that it's trying to tell. It's really simple. And again, it is just pure chaos once this ball kind of gets rolling. But pacing of this movie is just so well done. And on that note, I am ready for the drumsticks to fall so we can talk about this one in the Rorschach rating scale. I am going to go ahead and give The Monkey a 5 out of 5. I loved everything about this movie, from its dark sense of humor to its surprising emotional core to just how creative the gags were in this movie and just how impressive the pacing was here. And honestly, I think this movie is going to go down as one of the best films of the year, not only in genre, but in the medium of film. Now, I understand that it is probably way too early in the year to kind of make a rash statement like that, but I made it last year about Immaculate, and that ended up being in my top 3 films of last year, so anything's really capable at this point. Let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content here at Victims and Villains, we create content like what you're watching right now to not only talk about great films like The Monkey, but also to ask the question of what do they teach us about mental health and how can we grow in our understanding of mental health. If you guys don't know, about a month ago, I made an update on all of our socials, kind of essentially pausing Victims and Villains as a whole, not only by my decision, but also in agreement with our board of directors. My wife was hospitalized, and it was pretty serious for a long time, and I think that it's a bit ironic coming back into content creation and talking about a movie that is so heavy on death and mortality and the afterlife and what comes next and the grieving process like The Monkey. Honestly, I think a lot of people are going to look at The Monkey and just kind of feel like this is campy, this is silly. But honestly, when you kind of peel back a lot of those more lighter comedic layers and even goofier, campier side to this film as well, I think what you find is a very real conversation about death, very real conversation about mortality and how our mental health kind of lies in the in-between of both of those conversations. I've lost several people in my life, whether that has been to accidents or cancer or natural causes or unfortunately suicide. But there's something that hits a little bit differently when that individual, when the conversation of death or mortality comes up, is your spouse or your partner or your mother or your father. There's a point where your life starts to honestly kind of reshift focus and repositions itself to kind of realign your priorities. And I love that this film kind of really engages that conversation. There is a moment in this film where Hal and Bill's mother actually sits down and kind of has that conversation with them. Sometimes I think we live life at such a breakneck pace that it feels almost damn near impossible for us to even have conversations around death or the afterlife or heaven or hell or purgatory or whatever you believe comes next after this life. And the truth of the matter is that they're hard conversations to have. They make us dig down deep into our feels and face the fact that one day the people that we love and that we hold dear are not going to be here tomorrow. Whether that is by a unfortunate infliction of their own hand or natural causes or disease or whatever have you. Death, much like mental health, is something that we should be articulating and having conversations around and kind of breaking this stigma and normalizing the conversation, especially when we are young and especially for the generations that are coming up. Death has been a constant conversation for myself, and so maybe this is just hitting me harder, just giving the circumstances of what my life has been these last 5 weeks, how deeply it has impacted my mental health. But I just want to take this time to encourage and advocate for these conversations to be regular mainstay among our conversations. Because at the end of the day, this type of stuff is going to have an impact on your mental health. It has the power to cause things like alcoholism, depression, drug addiction, suicidal thoughts, etc., etc. So if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, depression, etc., please reach out and check out the Mental Health Resource Library. There is a link in our show notes below. This is the reason why we create the content we do. You're not alone in this. The Monkey is now playing in theaters everywhere from Neon. So check your local listings. Please go check out and watch this movie. It's incredible. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, within the next couple of days to a week, we will be providing updates on when the podcast will be returning, when more movie reviews, regular movie reviews like this will be returning, more information about some of our music and film events, Horrific Hope, and much more. So please click the links and down below, hit that subscribe button so that when we do update you guys, you don't miss it. So thank you guys for watching and stay classy.